All righty, fellas. We are back. We missed a week 8 fantasy football recap because I was in Mexico, but we are back recapping everything from the week 9 slate, talking about all the big performances, all the bust performances, overreactions, underreactions, going through 4 dynasty trades, as well as our waiver wire ads for week 10 coming up, our early waiver ads. I'll cover, the top 10 guys tomorrow morning, but this one should definitely be fun. I'm seeing a lot of people with some overreactions in the chat already. Let's kick things off with the takeaways. We always started off with the week 9 takeaways, and the first takeaway that we're going to have, like we usually do, let's recap some of the big injuries of the week. I would say the biggest injury was Daniel Jones tearing his ACL, not confirmed, but he did go down non-contact. And he should be just fine, I would imagine, like long term. I don't know exactly what Daniel Jones is going to be in terms of job security from like a dynasty perspective, but even if it's not with the Giants, he'd probably be a starter elsewhere. This one's going to have a big ripple effect, mainly on Saquon, because I mean Waller's out already. There's no wide receivers that we really cared about. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the whole Daniel Jones ACL tear? It hasn't been confirmed yet, but it looked like an ACL tear, and it probably is one.
Well, I mean, the problem is if you have him in Dynasty, like if you have a share of Daniel Jones, obviously now you're kind of worried, right? Because he is not the guy that's going to sit back and kill you 40 times from the pocket per game. Like you need him to be able to be mobile. And I'm just a little bit worried about the recovery here, midseason ACL. And he's not the type of quarterback that the team's going to give the benefit of the doubt to. Like if they start out next year, maybe the first 4 games of the season, they're without Daniel Jones and they're 0-4. Who's to say that if they don't get a rookie quarterback this year, they're not gearing for one the following year?
Yeah, honestly, dude, they're picking 4th in the draft right now. Like, I actually think it's malpractice if one of the top quarterbacks is in range, whether they're on the board at 4 or not, or maybe you finish the season with like 2 or 3, or you can trade up for not a huge cost or something like that. Like, if you can get Drake May or Caleb Williams, to me, it is absolutely malpractice to stick with Daniel Jones.
100%. I will say, though, like, I'm assuming that it's probably going to be tough to get one of those guys. At this point, I think like JJ McCarthy is probably in play for them because he's going to go high. Which team takes him? I don't know. Is it the Raiders? Is it the Giants?
Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy, they'd all be kind of in play depending on where they're actually picking. But yeah, that was definitely the biggest injury of the week because, it's a season ender. Yet another quarterback going down with a season-ending injury. It's been like so many of them so far this year. Right away when I saw it, I'm like, he tore his ACL. Like that literally looked like a torn ACL immediately.
What's crazy is I actually didn't even have Red Zone going because I was so focused on the Cowboys game. And then I just checked Twitter. I'm like, oh, okay. So what happened to Daniel Jones? And
yeah, every doctor I was like, he tore his ACL. Like they all said the same thing. We also had a couple other pretty big injuries too. This was a pretty big week of injuries. Dallas Goedert thinning out the tight end position a little bit. He fractured his forearm, I believe, is what the official injury is. He's on IR now, so people are losing a pretty stable tight end option, and we'll probably talk about a tight end or two later on in the waiver section, and definitely tomorrow I will.
So I'll give some context to it. Basically with the how it happened with Dallas Goedert, it was such a weird play. So he got leverage on Marquise Bell, who was covering him, right? And when Marquise Bell tried to tackle him, Dallas Goedert just stuck out his arm trying to stiff arm him. But the problem is Marquise Bell, he's a small guy. So, okay, you're going to stick out your arm and I can't reach your chest. Guess what? I'm going to tackle you by your arm. And when Dallas Goedert went down, you could see like the front of his forearm to his wrist was just like gooping. And I'm like, dude, he broke something. Like he broke something 100%. When I saw him on the ground, I'm like, dude, he's going to IR.
Yeah, I think he's probably droppable, most likely. I mean, like he's going to be out for 4 games. Like he'll probably work his way back. It's possible that if you have an IR spot, obviously just throw him into your IR spot. But if you don't and you need to pick up a tight end, like I think he's a more than fine drop there. Christian Watson, who's been one of the most frustrating players of 2023, in my opinion. He gets a concussion, and also I think they're calling like an upper body injury of some kind. They said he left with multiple injuries, and I saw like back injury, concussion. He's obviously been dealing with lower body stuff all year as well. So not good for Christian Watson. If you guys drafted him in the 4th round, we sincerely apologize about that one because we got a lot of shares as well. And I still think the thesis was there. Like he was a good, rookie season coming in with Jordan Love. Jordan Love's been horrible, even when Christian Watson's been on the field, and Watson himself just can't stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, responsibility for obviously being high on this guy, but at the same time, I mean, the process was there. It's just not our fault that the guy keeps getting hurt and Jordan Love can't hit the broadside of a barn.
Yeah, I mean, Love was part of the analysis. Like he was a boomer bust type of option. Like that was the way. If I would have said, "How does Christian Watson bust coming into the year?" I would have been like, "Jordan Love is terrible." Is probably what I would have said.
Yeah, amen. The next one, obviously a big one, Cam Akers tearing his other Achilles. This was like, how unlucky can you be as a running back to not only tear your Achilles once, not only tear that same Achilles again, but you tore both Achilles. That's insane to me. So obviously, big oof, like hopefully speedy recovery. Hopefully we can see him someday back in the NFL. But at this point,
Dynasty-wise, he's probably
he's
cooked.
cooked.
Like, I mean, you have him on your IR and kind of hope for the best. He's a free agent. He's probably not going to even get signed, maybe. Maybe he's like training camp next year. Somebody signs him or something like that. Not good. And Alexander Mattison is obviously the major beneficiary of this because early in the season, we saw Alexander Mattison work as like a 70-75% snap share guy. He obviously had a big game this past week, scoring a receiving touchdown, having probably one of his best games all season. Easiest sell high in all of fantasy, in my opinion. People are going to say, oh, Alexander Mattison, he could be like an RB1 rest of the season. It's like we saw him with this workload early on in the year, and he wasn't good. So if people are seeing the big performance, they're seeing the Cam Akers Achilles tear, just literally sell Alexander Mattison for a different running back or use him in a package deal to upgrade to a more stable option.
You forgot one piece of context, too, is that he was useless in fantasy with that role when Kirk Cousins was at quarterback. So if somebody is like willing themselves because he had a decent fantasy day from a point production standpoint, without even contextualizing the fact that, maybe Josh Dobbs just played above his pay grade. And we'll get into Dobbs a little bit. That was a takeaway. I don't think he's going to be a complete train wreck. The quarterback position on the Vikings, I think they're probably going to get the 7th seed in the NFC at this point, to be honest. Like if Dobbs keeps playing that way, we'll get into it a little bit. But obviously bad news, Cam Akers. Hope he's okay, but he'll probably never play a sustainable role in the NFL ever again. Next one, Josh Downs not confirmed if it was a re-aggravation to his knee injury. Obviously went into the game with that Q tag, was slated to go, catches one pass, and then he just goes down. So do you have any more context on that injury?
Yeah, I mean, I saw Deepak and a couple other doctors say that if he did re-aggravate it, it's probably a 2 to 3 week absence, but it's possible also that he didn't re-aggravate it. He just didn't feel 100% and took himself out of the game. So if that's the case, he should be back next week and it's just a minor injury. But if we hear that he did in fact re-aggravate the injury, it's possible it's not out of the range of outcomes that he goes to IR, but it's probably more likely that he's out for like 2 to 3 games. Definitely an upgrade to Michael Pittman in the meantime, I would say. And then 2 other, I would say minor injuries just because both teams are on bye this week, and I think both players will be fine. Jalen Waddle suffered a MCL sprain, but he did return to the game, and the Dolphins are on bye this week. So I wouldn't be worried about him missing any time. Same goes for Jalen Hurts, who obviously looked limp at points in that Cowboys game. He suffered probably an MCL sprain as well, and the Eagles are on bye. So both guys, I'm not really concerned long-term for those.
Yeah, 100%. Basically, what happened when it came to Hurts is he re-aggravated that injury again. He finished the game. He should be ready to go, like you said, bye week, everything. Like he finished the game against the Cowboys. I doubt he's going to be out. But when he was in the pocket, basically a defender, I guess, hit the side of his knee and it kind of buckled in, and you could tell it was really bothering him at the end of the first half. Probably took whatever type of adrenaline to get through the second half. But yeah, no, you could tell he was in pain.
Yeah, for sure. And we actually have official word that Daniel Jones is now out for the year with torn ACL, as expected. I wasn't really even waiting on that news because I figured it was an ACL tear from the beginning. A lot of talk in the chat already about CJ Stroud. So that is, I think, the biggest takeaway of the entire slate from a redraft and a dynasty perspective. He probably is now going to be minus 500 to win offensive rookie of the year. He probably locked up the award with that performance, breaks the single game passing yardage record for a rookie quarterback. I think 470 passing yards, nearly 500 yards passing, 5 touchdowns against, I think we're a great defense, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But I mean, after that performance, I have no idea. Imagine your offense too. Let's just think about this. How many times have we made excuses for rookie quarterbacks that they don't have the talent around them? They don't have the protection around them. Their offensive scheme is not great. They don't have a run game. Dude, Devin Singletary did nothing on the ground. Absolutely nothing on the ground. And CJ Stroud, the Bucs defense knew all he could do was pass, and they still couldn't do anything about it. Tank Dell goes berserk. He was the wide receiver 1 on the week. Nico Collins finds the end zone as well. CJ Stroud, I mean, we're going to have the conversation right now. In Dynasty and in redraft, where does CJ Stroud rank?
So if we're going to dynasty rankings real quick, without a doubt, he's the quarterback 1 of this class. Let's just get that out of the way.
Yeah, it's not even. I don't even. Not even close. I mean, if you want to say from a fantasy perspective, when Anthony Richardson is back,
but the thing is, you have to bake in market implications in that. CJ Stroud right now has the chance by the end of the season. if he keeps playing the way he has been, bro, like you can make the argument he's in the tier with Herbert, Jackson, and Burrow. I think you can.
Yeah, I think you can. I think
Right?
you can make an argument that he's right there with those guys already, almost, to be honest. Like, so where I have him ranked, and we're going to do a sweeping update to our dynasty rankings. Like, let me ask you these questions. Would you rather have, because I'm sure your answer is CJ Stroud, but let's go from where he was coming from to where he is now. So, quarterback 1 in this class, he's ahead of Anthony Richardson, well ahead of Bryce Young as well. Tua Tagovailoa and Kyler Murray. You taking CJ Stroud?
Heartbeat. What?
Right, exactly. So, for me, the conversation point becomes, do you want Trevor Lawrence or do you want CJ Stroud? That is the conversation point from a dynasty perspective, because Trevor Lawrence was the highly decorated prospect. I would say he's been underwhelming this year. From a fantasy perspective, absolutely he's been underwhelming. But just in general, I think he's been underwhelming. The conversation point for me becomes, we've already seen this high-end fantasy ceiling from CJ Stroud, and he's younger than Trevor Lawrence. And the offense is like pretty young around him, too.
Yet, bro,
like none of these guys are going anywhere. Nico Collins is still young. Tank Dell is really young. They can still add.
That's what I was gonna say. They still have cap, dude. Like Dell can be their 3 for the future. Collins are really good too. Imagine they added like an alpha number 1 on this team.
Ayuk is the perfect guy. Like their coaching staff came from San Francisco, dude. We get Brandon Ayuk in this offense, and we're firing on all cylinders. What if the Browns' first round pick ends up being in the middle of the first round? You could take Brock Bowers and add him to this offense.
Fuck, Brock Bowers, Malik Neighbors, man. Like, you're adding a stud there. I mean, heck, you want to go out and get his former boy, Emeka Egbuka, that's possible. Or, hell, you want to, if it's possible, you want to go up and trade for Marvin Harrison Jr. to reunite them.
I mean,
that's
if you didn't trade
possible,
your pick for Will Anderson, now that I think about it, like, your pick might end up being lower than Cleveland's anyway, so it might not even matter.
Yeah, no, dude, stock up to CJ Stroud. Kudos to him. It's funny because, like, coming into the cycle, he was known as, like, the quarterback of this group with, like, he's got the highest floor, but Bryce and A-Rich have the higher ceilings. And, I mean, I'll just eat crow, man. I thought he was a good quarterback prospect. I did not see this type of ceiling in year 1.
I'm glad I came around, because the first 2, I was in Mexico last time in January watching the tape on CJ Stroud. The first 2 games I watched were
the Georgia game was the big one, man.
Like, I didn't watch the Georgia game until his 3rd game, though. So I watched 2 games before the Georgia game, and one of them was his like worst performance of the year. I can't remember exactly what game it was, but the fact that I was like, dude, I don't know if CJ Stroud's really got it to be like an elite quarterback. When I was watching him at first, people started to talk me into him. I watched the Georgia game. I've watched the Georgia game multiple times. Like, it wasn't even just the first watch. I went back in April and watched it again. With like, the lens of like, oh, the S2 score and, all that bullshit that we were talking about with CJ Stroud. And I was like, dude, this guy can play, man. Like, it's pretty clear. And I'm also starting to think that when we say a player is a high floor player, that should be more of an asset in the draft process than we even give it credit for. Because think about like the high floor receivers too. Like, oh, Chris Olave is not going to be like a number 1 in the NFL, but he's a high floor receiver. Devontae Smith, maybe not going to be like a high ceiling receiver, but he's a high floor receiver. Jordan Addison, not really a high ceiling receiver, but he's a high floor receiver. All these guys that were high floor players are just ending up being hits in the NFL.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But I mean, kudos to CJ Stroud, like you kind of said. He's up to quarterback 7 for me in Dynasty. And you were going to pose this question. I know it got asked in the chat. CJ Stroud or Trevor Lawrence? At this point, dude, like CJ Stroud's going to be valued a tier above Trevor Lawrence by the end of the season. Like
I think if you're in a rebuild, you can realistically make the argument to me that you would rather have CJ Stroud than Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson. Honestly, like if you were in a full status rebuild, those guys are like 28 years old. Like CJ Stroud is really young, and he's probably in a tier with those guys. Like I have Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow a tier above Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud, and Trevor Lawrence now in that tier. But again, you could make the argument for Stroud as high as 5, in my opinion.
I mean, to me, I think 3 to 7 is honestly a tier at this point. It sounds reactionary, but
I think the one disagreement I would have is that maybe Jalen Hurts has jumped into the first tier with Mahomes and Lamar and Allen.
I would be cool making him his own mini tier, but I can't put anybody on Allen and Mahomes tier, to be honest.
I can. With Hurts, I can do it. He's got the contract. He's got the fantasy production. I can personally get there. But the rest of that, like Burrow, Herbert, Lamar, CJ Stroud, maybe like Lawrence is sliding out of this tier based on his performance so far. But I do want to see the full season before I make any rash decisions on Lawrence, because I think he could sun run at the end of the year with Zay Jones coming back this week. Calvin Ridley now kind of a bye week to kind of catch his breath. Christian Kirk's obviously been good all year. Evan Ingram's been good. ETN's having a breakout season. Like
for what it's worth, you're like that is fair too with Hurts, because the rushing touchdowns, that's a big point.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as they get inside the 1 yard line, which dude, I don't think any team is inside their opponent's 1 yard line more than the Philadelphia Eagles. Like, I don't understand it, man. How many
And Swift
times
will never get a carry in that area of the field. Like, it's
never,
never going to happen.
never. So I mean, like, I do agree to that certain point where the passing, like, it's good, but it's not like up to like Burrow, Herbert levels. But yeah, the rushing alone, man, like he's probably going to rush for 12 plus touchdowns a year. So probably right on that regard, man.
Yeah,
Probably
I mean,
right.
like, is the offensive line going anywhere anytime soon? I guess Kelsey's older. Lane
Kelsey's the
Johnson's
only
a
one.
little bit older. Like the scheme is great. AJ Brown's not going anywhere. Devontae Smith is probably going to get an extension at some point. Like, I find it a hard time to say that. Like, again, from a raw talent perspective, Patrick Mahomes is a better real life quarterback. From a fantasy perspective, in terms of long term projection, you could make the argument that Jalen Hurts should be ahead of him in Dynasty.
Yeah, because of the point. Yeah, no, yeah. From
Like, Mahomes is throwing to Kelsey, who's like 35 years old, and nobody else pretty much. And he's not performing at the level that Jalen Hurts is performing at right now.
No, that's definitely fair. And I think the rest of the season, you probably have to adjust to that, to be honest. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, last thing I want to say on CJ Stroud before we move on is I'm very glad anybody who asked me a CJ Stroud question this week, I'm 100% certain I said CJ Stroud for the answer.
Oh, dude, we got one. I think somebody asked Stroud or Dak, and I'm just thinking back, and I'm like, oh my god, you were like right either way. But I think we said CJ
you were
Stroud.
a lot more right if you played Stroud.
Yeah. No. But that's what I mean. It's like, it's crazy. Would they not just quarterback 1 and 2 on the slate? Except CJ Stroud had like 13 more points because he threw for 5 touchdowns and 500 yards.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I want to skip ahead to one of our other takeaways because so many people are talking about Bijan in the chat right now. So let's skip ahead to the panic meter on some of these running backs because I'm sure a lot of people that have Bijan Robinson drafted him due in part to our advice. And right now, it's looking like probably our biggest L of the entire season, although he did perform really well in September. So if you didn't believe, you probably had chances to sell him at that point. What is the panic meter on Bijan Robinson? Because I know my answer to this question.
6, 7.
Yeah, I think the general consensus will be 10. Like,
yes.
Bijan's done. He's cooked. We all hate Arthur Smith, and Bijan's maybe an RB2 rest of the season. But I still have him at 6 in my rest of season rankings. And the rest of season rankings video will probably be coming out tomorrow afternoon. And I'll go through all the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end tiers. But at the same time, like, it's not like there's 7 RB1s that are better than Bijan right now. It's like, it's ETN, it's McCaffrey, it's Eckler. And then at that point, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe you prefer Jonathan Taylor. Maybe you prefer Breece Hall. Maybe you prefer Josh Jacobs, maybe, or something like that. Like, but Bijan is right there with those guys because although he's not getting the inside the 5 work, which makes you want to punch yourself in the face repeatedly when you have Bijan Robinson, he's still getting a great workload. He's still getting receiving work. And there's maybe the upside that Arthur Smith gets fired soon and maybe Bijan gets more carries out of that. Regardless, I think that he's still a mid RB1 rest of the season. It's just like, I will say he's probably no longer a legendary upside running back.
No, he's not. And it's funny. Did you see the video that came out of like Arthur Smith's son, like pretend with a fake mustache on with a play sheet? And then it was a video that went around and like he was saying like he was like calling a play for Bijan, and somebody tweeted out, he's like, he already calls more plays for Bijan than his dad.
That's brutal. Anyways, I mean, Bijan, again, he's going to, like, everybody's going to be really pushing the panic meter. I already saw him on the trade block in my home league, and you best believe I'm sending offers for him because,
100%.
Again, like, when we're talking, would you rather have Tony Pollard than Bijan? Like, I would still rather have Bijan. Would you rather have, Josh Jacobs than Bijan? I think that's a conversation. Jacobs is a little bit more consistent, but Bijan, to me, has an ability to sun run the rest of the season. He's still a rookie running back. He has the ability to kind of improve his standing and his stake rest of the year, but he has been really frustrating so far, especially the last month, man. Like, the guy's barely eclipsed like 20 points in like 4 games.
Real talk, bro. Imagine we just got saved the hassle and Bijan Robinson was a Cowboy right now. Could you imagine if he had Tony Pollard's workload, what he was getting?
He could have been a Texan also. Remember, there was reports that Bijan, the Texans were really high on him. Imagine if he was running with CJ Stroud right now. That would be a pretty fun thing. Like, so again, I'm seeing a lot of people saying like Atlanta's not a good fit for Bijan. Arthur Smith isn't a good fit for the Falcons. Like, I still think that Bijan is being used pretty well. The only problem is that he's not getting red zone work. Like, if he was getting red zone work, I don't think anybody would be complaining right now because we'd have Bijan scoring a touchdown this past week and, having a 21-point performance. Like, it's not like he's not being used properly. He's running like 75% of the team's routes. He's like very few running backs. I think McCaffrey and ETN and Eckler are like the only guys running more routes for their team than Bijan Robinson. It's just so annoying that he's never, like, Arthur Smith doesn't just throw a fade ball to Drake London, throw a pass to Kyle Pitts, let Bijan Robinson run the ball. When it comes to the red zone, he pulls out the galaxy brain of all galaxy brains and gives, like, end arounds to fucking Jonnu Smith. Like, why are you doing that? Just hand the ball to your 8th overall draft pick.
Just simply don't do that. Like, just don't.
Just don't. You score, and it's not like he's still scoring. It's one thing to be arrogant at the podium and be like, all I care about is winning. Like, we're winning
toxic
games.
Group thing.
We're scoring points. Like, dude, you're not scoring. So that point doesn't fly anymore.
Hey, listen to me, Arthur Smith. You say, oh, it's a tough league and the quarterback position and this, that, and you want to make all these fucking excuses. Well, guess what? On the other side, Minnesota Vikings were just saying, fuck it, we ball all game. The quarterback gets hurt in the first quarter. They put a quarterback in, and again, we may as well just make this the takeaway right now. Josh Dobbs comes in, week with no install, gets traded at the deadline, expecting to not even remotely touch the field all game, barring maybe a kneel down at the end of the game. He comes in on a whim, and he fucking puts up points. And the Vikings offense looks good. And Kevin O'Connell, like, he literally said on the fly that Dobbs was learning the offense and the quarterback coach was working with him to making sure he was prepared. I don't know what wizardry was going on there, but that's not normal. Like, Josh Dobbs was objectively worse in his last 4 games for the Cardinals than he was in his first game without knowing the Vikings offense. And the takeaway that I have here is maybe the Vikings players aren't quite left for dead. Obviously, we talked about the fact that you should be selling Alexander Madison because people are going to start having this optimism. But at the same time, this quarterback position is way better than I thought it would be sans Kirk Cousins. Like, with Kirk Cousins out, I thought, okay, maybe this is like a 16-point per game offense. It's gross. Like, they try to win with defense. I don't know what the heck I was thinking there, because Josh Dobbs proved that it was complete moot. It was complete moot. And moving forward, obviously, Hawkins is going to be a top 5 tight end. Jordan Addison showed he still commanded 7 targets. Didn't have a big fantasy day, I think 5 for 51. But if that's going to be a floor game for him, sign me up.
Yeah, and of course, I would imagine Justin Jefferson has a chance to come back now because
big time.
They're in the playoff race. Like, they have a chance to make the playoffs.
They're probably the 7th seed.
Not like, I don't think they're going to be like, oh, Cousins is coming back for the playoff run or anything like that. But at the same time, I mean, they're still pro athletes. They don't want to lose games intentionally.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And like we were kind of mentioning, like, the NFC right now, what is stopping them from being the 7th seed? So if you have Justin Jefferson, and if you hold them and you need a big boost to your lineup, the biggest worry was, oh, maybe they tank rest the season and JJ gets put on IR and never comes back because he wants to contact. But dude, like, they're probably going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I would say this is big stock up because I was really hesitant to do this. I would say big stock up for those of you guys that traded for Justin Jefferson in redraft. Yes. With the expectation that eventually he would come back and you'd be able to use him down the stretch of the season. I traded for him in Dynasty, which I'm very glad about. But I think, redraft trades were also wise of Justin Jefferson. But that, I mean, you looked bad after Kirk Cousins got down with an Achilles. You were like, shit, I traded for Justin Jefferson. He does not have his quarterback right now. At the very least, I think Josh Dobbs can keep this offense competitive. And even Jaren Hall, I mean, the first couple of drives, he looked fine. He didn't look terrible. I think he could actually be somewhat serviceable if Dobbs were to struggle at any point and they had to go see what the kid can do. But yeah, good news for the Vikings offense. Back to the panic meter real quick. We can talk about your Cowboys offense because a lot of people are talking about Tony Pollard as well. And Tony Pollard, one of the most surprising things of the entire season so far to me is how easy of a projection it was to just say Tony Pollard be a top 5 running back this year. And sometimes, again, we've seen it work out the other way around where you're like, hey, guy steps into a new role, especially at running back. At wide receiver and, other positions, not as much. But at running back, when you're suddenly gifted the touches, we've seen guys like Sun run their way all the way to like top 5 finishes. And Tony Pollard was such an easy case, right? It was like, okay, he's in a good offense. He's, a really, really talented player. He's been like 90 plus PFF grades for like 3 straight years. And now that he's getting the full workload, he's turned into Ezekiel Elliott. Like, he's not the guy that we saw when he was getting partial workload, and he hasn't scored a touchdown since the first game. And Figs points out, he would have had a touchdown if it wasn't called back. And, the panic meter, I would say Pollard is a buy low for sure. He's still a top 10 running back for me rest of the season, but my expectations are vastly different now than they were 5 weeks ago, even.
Yeah, no, it's honest to God, it's whack to see what's going on. And I'm glad you pointed that out because What is that genuinely? Like on replay, it shows Chuma Edoga reporting eligible to the freaking ref, saying, "Hey, listen, I'm the sixth offensive lineman. They score a touchdown on that play. Oh, ref. Oh no, I don't remember you doing that. Here's a flag, ineligible player. Are we kidding, man? Like Tony Pollard's getting the worst bounces going his way.
He is,
Literally
dude. And even in games where it's a close game and you'd think Pollard would be involved, it's either a blowout and the Cowboys win by 40 points and Pollard gets taken out of the game for Rico Dowdle, or like just we can't get like every drive. It feels like, because as a Tony Pollard manager in my home league, I understand all of your guys' gripes. The first and goal, it's always a Tony Pollard carry, gets stuffed at the after a 1 yard gain, and they never go back to him for the rest of the goal line drive. Like it's so frustrating that the guy can't just get one open hole in the red zone to score a touchdown. Like it's so frustrating sometimes owning Tony Pollard.
Yeah, dude. Even like just I'm glad because as a Cowboys fan, obviously the offense has looked a lot better, just letting Dak do Dak things. But at the same time, it's come at the fault of Tony Pollard. He doesn't even have that 20 plus opportunity per game workload right now because they're just throwing the ball at an outrageous rate. So I can't even talk right now, just thinking of the game.
Yeah, So coming into the season, back in March, let's think back to March. Ezekiel Elliott gets cut. What was our first impression?
Oh, Tony Pollard's going to be a league winner.
Expected to get all of the work. That's not what my first impression was. My first impression was they're going to sign Leonard Fournette or Dalvin Cook, like somebody who's
that wasn't mine.
Grinder.
That wasn't mine. I mean, looking back, they probably should have knowing that Tony Pollard was dealing with that injury. However, I think the solution might even be on the roster, dude. I think Rico Dowdle should probably be more involved. To be honest, like Tony Pollard, he's looked better in these last couple weeks, but especially at the beginning portion of the season, he just didn't look like a good running back. Period. And again, there's scheme issues there. The offensive line hasn't played well at all for the most part this year in general. But at some point, dude, Tony, you got to make people miss. And good signs. He made some people miss in that Eagles game. Look better than he basically has all year. But we need more of that, man. Like if you're going to get 15 touches now with the Dak-led Cowboys passing offense, we're going to need you to break off, a 7 yards per carry, 6 target game.
Are we sure that Kellen Moore doesn't know how to call a rushing offense? Because like that could be the difference too. Like it feels like every carry that Pollard gets is 2nd and 10, and like low fantasy points expected situations. He's not getting used in space like he was with Kellen Moore. And maybe that's because he's the starting running back now, but at the same time, like you can still use him that way. That's how the Jets use Breece Hall. Like you don't have to give the guy all 15 of his carries every single week on 1st and 10 or 2nd and 10, which is what it feels like when you're watching Tony Pollard.
And I will say, quick note, by the way, although we're just describing how gross it is that Tony Pollard's been this year, he's still, again, we will get to it this week, probably the biggest buy candidate at running back because the next 2 games alone, the Cowboys are probably going to be implied for 28-ish or so points against the Giants and the Carolina Panthers. The game script's going to be working for him. And if it doesn't work out this week or in these next couple of weeks, then we know the answer for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I would say if he doesn't have a 30, really do not sell him right now. Like you should not. Like he's so at the bottom of the totem pole right now in terms of his value. It's so irritating because watch the Cowboys win like 40-3 and Pollard not be involved in the game plan against the Giants. But at the same time, like we can't expect the Cowboys to do that to every bad team. Most of the time when your team plays a bad team, you beat them by like 10 points. You don't beat them by 40.
Speaking of, so I saw the opening line moved out for the Cowboys. So for reference, the Cowboys are hosting the Giants this week. Daniel Jones is hurt. What do you think the line is?
14.5.
16.5 with a 39 over under.
Jesus.
It might be the most
Tommy DeVito starting for the rest of the season also for the Giants?
Tyrod Taylor's so hurt.
Like, oh, dude, that's brutal. So Giants fans, like, just hope you out-tank the Cardinals and Bears, because honestly, that's the only thing that can save you at this point in time.
Yeah, you need Drake. Hopefully, for my case, I don't have to see Drake in the division. Hopefully, you guys get like the 5th pick. But...
Caleb, or potential. Dude, they're still in play for Caleb, dude. I think the Cardinals, once Kyler Murray comes back, they're going to start winning games.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the Panthers did revert back.
Panthers stink, so they might have the 1st pick, and that'll go to
the Bears.
Yeah, it's a tough situation for Pollard. He just needs to figure his shit out. And let's go rapid fire on a couple other backfield situations, some trends that we saw as well. Jonathan Taylor up to 75% of the snaps this past week. Great news for him. About half the routes, half the long down and distance work as well. Jonathan Taylor is RB what rest of the season? 4?
Yeah, top 5 for sure. Top 5 for sure.
That's like, it sucks because we have Jonathan Taylor and Breece Hall is my RB 4 and 5 rest of season, both of whom play with like bottom 6 NFL quarterbacks right now. Because, hypothetically, we would much rather have Tony Pollard be a guy like that, who's the RB4 of the rest of the season. But Jonathan Taylor and Breece Hall are proving that they are needle movers at the running back position. They can carry their offenses almost single-handedly.
Yeah. I agree with you.
Pollard is in the bet. Like, dude, if you dropped Breece Hall or Jonathan Taylor in the Cowboys offense right now, it would be curtains. Like, they'd be probably the RB1 or 2 in fantasy right now.
Probably, yeah. Pollard hasn't played well this year. I also want to touch upon a backfield because you mentioned panic meter on mid RB1s, but it seemed like if you had Kenneth Walker a few weeks ago, you're on the top of the world. Kenneth Walker, obviously, a couple big time performances, suffers that calf injury, and we've seen these last couple weeks, man, that Charbonnet's playing way more than people want to see. And if we're looking at this week alone, Charbonnet actually outsnapped Kenneth Walker 51% to 49%. Again, game script is going to happen here. They lost big. Maybe it's just because they were getting blown out by the Ravens and they wanted to resort to the passing game. And obviously, Charbonnet is more of the pass down back comparatively to him and Kenneth Walker. But that's an issue, man. Like if you are affected by game scripts and you are not the true RB1, I'm going to need to see that type of efficiency in these last 4 weeks in the passing game. He simply hasn't been the efficient receiver that we'd expect him to be. If he can't earn that type of work, is Geno turning back into a pumpkin, man? Like, is Geno turning back into a pumpkin?
How many times did I say that this offseason that I was worried that Geno Smith might not be the greatest quarterback in the world? He's turning the ball over like crazy. The Seahawks passing game is so it's so watered down because Metcalf can't get a lot of targets. Tyler Lockett will have a spike game here and there and then disappear for 3 weeks in a row. JSN's starting to work his way back into the backfield. It's like, in theory, this offense should be one of the best in the NFL. Did you drop like a quarterback playing at like an MVP level right now in this offense? We'd be talking about a crazy like Dolphins-like situation. Like if you drop Tua in this offense right now, imagine how much better Metcalf, Lockett, JSN, Charbonnet, and Walker would all be.
I'm a little bit skeptical with the Tua simply because I think the system right now.
Okay, well, let's drop Burrow in the offense instead.
Okay, Burrow. Yeah. That 100%.
But yeah, that's the sketchy thing. And you guys saw the graphic that I was putting up here. Charbonnet has been better than Kenneth Walker this year. He's 5.8 yards per carry, 78.7 rushing grade. And it's not like Walker's been bad. Like 4.4 yards per carry, 75.7 PFF rushing grade is good. But like Pete Carroll has come out and said, like, dude, Charbonnet needs to get the ball more. Like, and I don't disagree with him. He's been really good. So the sketchy thing now is like, I'll talk about Charbonnet and the waiver stuff, but the sketchy thing now is like, if you have Kenneth Walker, like you probably can't sell him. Like I'm glad I sold him 2 weeks ago. And ironically, I sold him and Josh Palmer, who's now on IR, for Tony Pollard and Drake London. And that hasn't borne a lot of fruit yet, but I think it will down the stretch of the season. So I'm feeling pretty good about that trade. But yeah, Kenneth Walker, the panic meter's high for me. I would say of these 3 guys, Pollard, Bijan, and Walker, the panic meter is highest for Kenneth Walker, in my opinion. And I have him as like a mid RB2 rest of the season, probably high end RB2 at best.
Yeah, and I got a little flack on it. Like, how do you have Walker so low? Because I had him at, I think, RB17 on the running back starts this show, and I said it. I mean, like, until he can like dominate his own backfield, he's not matchup proof, man. You play against the Baltimore Ravens, you can get worked out of the game plan quite easily.
Yeah. They have like a brutal schedule rest of the season too. If you look at Walker's schedule, it is awful. I think he plays I know we play them like twice.
We play. Yeah, he plays the 49ers twice. I know he plays Washington this upcoming week. While they're not a great defense, they are the definition of a pass funnel defense, 100%, especially without their pass rushers. So I'm assuming if the Seahawks are going to move the ball, it's going to be through the passing game. You play the Niners twice, like you said. You play the Dallas Cowboys. You play the Philadelphia Eagles. You play the Tennessee Titans. You play the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Like, dude, how are you going to run against any of those teams? Legitimately,
you're not.
Like, even like. Yeah, it's brutal for Kenneth Walker. And then a couple other backfield trends, and then we can move on here. We have Alvin Kamara sneakily down to 50% of the snaps this week. He's been declining snap share-wise for every game since week 6, and he lost some real touches this time. Carries, targets, routes, long down and distance work to Jamal Williams, which is partially why I was a little hesitant on the whole Alvin Kamara buy-in after those couple games where he was getting great targets and stuff. I still think he's a good running back rest of the season, but I would imagine most of your league mates view him as like a top 5 to 8 guy. And if you can get that type of price tag for Alvin Kamara, like you have to sell him, in my opinion. Because for me, it's looking more like a high-end RB2, low-end RB1, given the fact that I think Jamal Williams can play and I think he's going to be involved. of course, Taysom Hill's going to take away some work, and then Kendre Miller also can play some snap as well.
I will say I'm a little bit more bullish on Kamara than you. I still think he's like a pretty clear like low end RB1, mid end RB1. Like he's my RB9, I believe, rest of the season right now. But like you kind of said, like people might be valuing him inside the top 5. Like at this point, man, like you might be able to flip Alvin Kamara for Bijan Robinson.
Like the ECR had him as the RB1 on the week coming into the year.
So did I.
And the Bears was a great matchup and stuff, but I don't think that was just because of the Bears matchup. I think people just viewed Kamara, you look at the expected points, models or whatever, like he was so high because of all the targets he was getting. But if he's going to split routes with Jamal Williams, like that's a big deal.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think we move on to the next point, and the next point here is actually going to be that the tight ends are here to stay. Man, like the tight end landscape looks as fruitful as it's ever been in fantasy football. On one hand, you got 98% of the snaps for Dalton Kincaid, a 32% target share. On the other hand, 80% of the snaps in 2 straight games for Dalton Schultz. CJ Stroud, we just mentioned at how high of a level he's been playing recently. Cade Otton played well. Taysom Hill's doing Taysom Hill things. Like if you're in a league where Taysom Hill's got tight end eligibility, the guy's been an absolute stud. Like this week, he threw for a touchdown. He caught a touchdown. He took like 9 carries for like 55 yards. Like the tight end landscape, it doesn't really matter where you go, but you have an option. I mean, and on top of that, we haven't even mentioned my boy Jake Ferguson, who's quietly strung together 2 great games after the bye week, man. Like you got legitimately 12, 13 tight ends right now that are giving you sustainable production. I've never seen that.
Scored 2 touchdowns again,
Cole
too.
Kmet
like,
as well.
We're getting like, we're not talking about Kelsey and Andrews and Laporta and, TJ Hawkinson and, Evan Ingram, who's been really consistent. George Kittle, of course, is going to give you those boomer bust type of performances. You add in all the guys that we just mentioned. Like I have Dalton Kincaid as my tight end 4 rest of the season. The guy is literally, and I think the reason you really need to watch the Buffalo Bills games closely to truly appreciate and know that Dalton Kincaid is going to be an integral part of this offense. Because I swear to God, if we got a metric that says like first read targets, it feels like Dalton Kincaid is the first read on half of their plays. Honestly, like last night's game against the Bengals, it was, roll out for Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid leaking out to the flat, and the ball's there immediately. It's like, it was the first read on the play. He was open, and that's what we're doing. If he doesn't fumble too, the game, he tried to like hurdle a guy for a first down and he fumbled the ball. I'm not convinced he doesn't stay on his feet there and score. Like we're talking about a guy that has basically been like, especially in my league format, because I have Dalton Kincaid and I have Josh Allen as well. You get half point receiving first down bonus for tight ends. He's just been a first down machine, and he's been like 18 points per game the last 3 weeks that I've had him.
Yeah, and at this point, again, I mentioned it coming into the week, but Matt Harmon made a very, very good point, is that the biggest difference we've seen with the usage of both these receivers and the tight end with Dalton Kincaid is that they're playing a base 11 personnel, and like not just some, funky 11 personnel where Kincaid's playing the slot. They have a quality NFL wide receiver now with Khalil Shakir playing that slot role. Shakir, by the way, 71% of the snaps, 4 targets, outproduced Gabe Davis.
I think he'll find his way in tomorrow's waiver video as well.
It's going to be fun moving forward. If they're just going to empty out the offense like that, obviously, if you have James Cook, you're probably not a fan of how they're running offense now, but if they're going to empty everyone out and say, hey, listen, Josh Allen's got to play hero ball, and these receivers are our strength of the team at this point, because with how Shakir's been playing, without Kincaid, yeah, he's a good slot receiver, but God, imagine him with tight end matchups. He's going to be even better like he's shown these last few weeks. So I'm excited, man. I think this Bills offense is going to be one of the league-winning units down the stretch, though. That's probably pretty obvious.
No, I mean, not really though, because I mean they got to play a bunch of tough games down the stretch. Like they got to play a bunch of good
high-scoring game environments.
They got to win. They're not even in a playoff spot right now. Like they got to win games. It's not like early in the season. I think at the end of September, the Bills were just coming off of like rompings of the Commanders, the Raiders. They just destroyed some teams right at the beginning of the year, and they've had some tough losses. And now they actually have to really win games, which is what you want as a Josh Allen manager, as myself and you are. Like we want to see Josh Allen throw like 40 times a game.
Oh yeah,
because he's also running more now too, because he's got to win. Like they can't lose games, or else it's not just like, oh, we're playing for the 1 seed in the AFC and Josh Allen's got to stay healthy for the playoffs. It's like, no, like we're not actually even in a playoff spot right now.
Yeah. What are they, 5-4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both the Browns, Jets, and Steelers are ahead of them right now for a playoff spot, which is wild.
Yeah. No,
I mean, I don't think that'll keep up. I think the Bills will, eventually, finish the season like 10-7 or 11-6 or whatever. But at the same time, like, I mean, they have some tough games. Like they still got to play the Chiefs. They still got to play
Cowboys,
the Dolphins. I think one more time. Like they got to play some good teams still.
Yeah, I mean, looking at their schedule right now, it's gonna get, especially from week 12 to 16, bro. So the next few weeks, next 2 weeks they play the Denver Broncos and the New York Jets. But from week 12 to 16, they have at Philadelphia, then they have their bye week, at KC, Dallas, at LA Chargers. We're going to know real quick what we're going to be seeing moving forward. Again, I think all those game environments are going to put up some points, man. We're talking about 50 plus over-unders, quarterbacks going toe-to-toe in each and every one of those games.
Yeah, exactly. And my trade that everybody said I lost, the Kyle Pitts and Kyler Murray for Dalton Kincaid. I mean, it's looking pretty good. I also got 30 fab in that trade, and I picked up Dalton Schultz to line my bench. And Dalton Schultz looks like an every week starter. And if I can use him plus another one of my running backs to tier up to a different guy this week, right now I'm trying to sell Tony Pollard with Dalton Schultz to the Dallas Goedert manager, who also has Travis Etienne. So I'm seeing if I can get to Etienne using either Pollard or Jacobs with Dalton Schultz to help him out at tight end. So hopefully that deal can get done. I'll definitely tweet that out if it does. But yeah, the tight end position looks pretty good, relatively speaking, compared to other years. Like, we have a real middle class, and that's basically the difference between right now and what we've seen in recent years. Before, I was like, you get your Kelsey and Andrew's son running the whole season, and nobody else is relevant. Right now, we have Laportas and Kincaids and Ingrams and Hawkinson and Kittle and all these guys that are easily usable tight end ones. And like, Goddard and Waller were also really solid options before they got injured as well. So yeah, this is definitely one of the better tight end seasons, at least I've seen in recent years. Let's group these last two takes together, and then we can get right into the dynasty trades of the video. We have the Rams wide receivers, obviously something that maybe people are going to be panicking about. I would probably be on the side of buying low because it looks like Matthew Stafford might have been close enough to playing this past week. But are we worried? Let's say Stafford is out 2 to 3 more games. Worst case scenario here. How worried are we about Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua right now?
Right now, if Brett Rippon's the starter, I think they got to be severely downgraded. But as soon as Stafford comes back, like, they're both back to being wide receiver ones. Like Puka Nacua, 10 to 14 area. Cooper Kupp's going to be a top 5 to 8 guy any given week. I don't think Cooper Kupp, for what it's worth, is going to be in my top 6 moving forward, because I think, like, right now, it's a pretty clear top 6. And if you guys don't know who I'm referring to, it's going to be this is assuming without Justin Jefferson coming back, by the way. Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, AJ Brown, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, and Amon St. Brown. Those are your 6 guys right now. And we talked about it off stream, but it kind of feels like there's a hierarchy at every single position in fantasy right now. Like, exactly the guys where if you're looking across the matchup, you're scared of their ceiling, and then everybody else kind of fills in.
Yeah, like more so than we usually see. Like, normally there's there's tiers at running back, and like some running back 1s are better than running back 2s and stuff. But like, I can't remember a time that like my running back 6 and my running back 24 have been closer than they are right now. And my wide receiver 8 and my wide receiver 35 are closer than they are right now. Normally it's like, okay, yeah, wide receiver 1 to 4 are really high up. Wide receiver 5 to like 15 are relatively in the same range. And then, then it starts to blend together. After like 20 receivers, then it starts to blend together. But this year, it's honestly after like 7, 8, 9, 10 guys that it starts to blend together.
Yeah, no, it's pretty crazy now. And I mean, speaking of that, I mean, you can just transition that to the 2-3 types, because I mean, trying to evaluate like the wide receivers 15 to 30 on fantasy right now, rest of the season, is an impossible task.
Yeah, I already know it's going to happen, because when I drop the rest of season rankings tomorrow, inevitably people are going to be mad about where I have this wide receiver 3 or where I have that wide receiver 2 or whatever, because, on any given week, right now, on the up right now in this kind of range that I'm talking about, to give you guys an idea, Amari Cooper has been really good the past couple weeks. Deontay Johnson, since he's come back, has been really good. T. Higgins, great week this past week, finally healthy. That was big for him. Michael Pittman Jr. has been pretty consistent all year, but especially this past week. And then Nico Collins, obviously coming off a big game. CJ Stroud looks like he's going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Those guys are all really good options. But like 3 weeks ago, they might have been like wide receiver 30 in my rankings. So it's like flip-flop every single week. Who has good matchups, who has good schedules, who's in good offenses. And then we have, in the meantime, DK Metcalf, Adam Thielen, Zay Flowers, Chris Godwin, George Pickens. All these guys are kind of on the downslope, when 2 or 3 weeks ago, we might have said, is George Pickens a top 15 receiver rest of the season? Like, we might have said some shit like that.
Well, dude, my wide receiver video aged like milk right away when I had George Pickens the tier above Deontay Johnson. But like, coming into the week, yes, Deontay Johnson had a lot of targets in the previous week, but at the same time, like, George Pickens has shown throughout the year that he's evolved as a player, and he just resorts straight back to, like you would say, knucklehead tendencies.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple guys too that I'm like starting to think are like severely overrated. DK Metcalf being one of them.
Yes.
Is DK Metcalf even a top 25 to 30 receiver rest of the season?
Probably 25 to 30, but he's not.
Like,
he's not.
is he though? Like, dude, look, like the wide receivers I have at 25 to 30, I feel much better about the DK Metcalf right now. Like, I have Christian Kirk as my wide receiver 25. Like, I would much rather have Christian Kirk than DK Metcalf rest of the season.
Yeah, I agree.
I have Nico Collins at 26. Like, we're talking about guys that are like much better options. So it's easy to say, oh yeah, DK Metcalf is a wide receiver too, but he's really not. He's a wide receiver 3.
Yeah. He is. And I mean, we talked about it coming into the season. Like, dude, like Tyler Lockett's already been chewing into him like throughout his career. JSN now is added to the fold. Like, what are we dealing with here? Like, what is he? Like, yeah, he looks like freaking Megatron, but you got to play like it someday.
Yeah, some of my biggest gutalytics takes that have aged pretty well so far this season are Geno might be Geno from like 2013 to 2022 or 2021. That was one of my like gutalytics takes that had no backing whatsoever. I'm just like, I don't know if I believe Geno Smith is like suddenly this elite quarterback. And then my other gutalytics take was like, I think Cooper Kupp's 2021 is never coming back. Like that was my other one where I was like, if you looked at the projections, if you wanted to get really statistical about it, it would be hard not to argue that Cooper Kupp was not a top 3 to 5 player off the board in fantasy drafts. And I was like, I'm just not doing it. Like the injuries and my gut are telling me like that's never happening again. That 2021 season was special and it's not going to happen again. And he's been really good when he's been on the field, but he also hasn't been nearly as dominant as 2021, like some people wanted to project.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah. So let's break down some dynasty trades and then we'll close it out with some rapid fire waiver stuff because I mean, it's not the greatest week of waivers anyway. We don't need to spend too much time on that. And also we have a couple guys in tonight's game that might factor in to the waiver wire discussion. So let's start it off with some dynasty trades here. Jay Beadle sends this one in, a 12 team super flex half PPR. He is rebuilding this team. And he says some player takes in here. He really loves Sam Howell long term, and he prefers JSN to Zay Flowers straight up. So I do as well. I think you're probably on the same same page with JSN versus Flowers. But what are your thoughts on this trade? And the 2025 first is currently 2-7 this year, but of course that is a 2025 first, not a 2024 first.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, John. Wait, is it? Did you say this is a one quarterback or super flex?
It's a super flex league.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, John. You gotta get more for Lamar Jackson here, personally. Like Lamar Jackson is still a top 7, even if you're low on him, he's still a top 8 asset in Dynasty. This is probably a 2024 first too short, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, Sam Howell is worth what on the open market?
I would be selling for a 1.
I if it was a guaranteed late one, I would hold Sam Howell. I think he's worth
mid to late 1. Say right 107, 108 projected. You're selling
in 24. I would take the 107. Like easily. If it was a 2025 mid to late first, I would probably keep Sam Howell. But if it was a mid
I would liquidate
to late first and 24 that had a chance to be like 107 to 109, I'd probably take that because I think this class is going to be pretty strong.
I'm worried about his standing long term. That's the kind of issue that I have. The reason being is they just traded off both their edge rushers, and they just changed ownership. Do you know who their owners are now for the Washington Commanders?
No idea.
The same owners that stripped down the Philadelphia 76ers in their trust the process years, where they built up a bunch of draft picks, got Ben Simmons, got Joel Embiid, got like Markelle Fultz, I think was in there as well. Like they got like 3 top 5 picks in the span of like 5 years. So they are used to organizationally tanking. So Washington, they traded two of their best players on the roster, their 2 best edge rushers. They know that right now they're kind of in purgatory as a roster. They're like maybe the 9th or 10th best team in the NFC. I feel like we're going to see within the next couple of years, they're going to try to go hard at a quarterback.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I tweeted out, is Sam Howell good with a poll? And 43% came yes, 11% came no, and 46% of the people voted, I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I feel about Sam Howell. Like, I liked Sam Howell as a prospect. He was my QB1 in the class. But, like, is Sam Howell good? Like, I have no idea. He's taking less sacks the last couple games. He's making better decisions. He, like, two of his every 3 games, he looks like a pretty solid franchise quarterback. But then he has, like, some significant blunders at times that make you be like, I don't know if this guy's going to get a
I
long leash, because it's one thing if he was a first round pick doing this, because then you're like, oh,
yeah.
he's probably going to have a longer leash. He's probably going to be the starter next year. They're going to add around him. But like when you have a 1-year audition, essentially, you kind of have to blow people away. And I don't think he's blowing them away, right? I think he's doing well, and I think he probably deserves another year. But at the same time, like, are they going to give it to him? Like you said, they might be prone to, tear it down and tank or whatever.
For what it's worth, from a fantasy perspective, he's been awesome. Like, he's been awesome.
Oh, he's been great from a fantasy perspective.
In 5 of the last 6 games, the team's thrown over 40 times because they realize they can't run the ball. So from fantasy, like, I understand maybe you have another selling window and you want to try to sell him off, but at the same time, you still gave up Lamar. So I'm kind of like there. Sam Howell, to me, bro, call me crazy. It reminds me of early career Jameis. It reminds me of Jameis.
Yeah, I give you that for sure. It kind of is a little like less team successy Carson Wentz kind of as well. Like maybe not the MVP year, but like the year after that, with the Philadelphia Eagles when he was back from the ACL tear, kind of almost reminds me of that a little bit. I think Johnny B is JB Beetle in this trade.
I know John.
Another first when I already own 8 in 2024. I mean, in that situation though, if you already own a lot of first in 2024, keep Lamar or trade him for a young quarterback who's more solidified. Stroud, yeah, like somebody like that. I would rather do that than take a unnecessary risk, in my opinion, because that's what I think you've done here. But I mean, 2025 for a guy that's 2-7. I mean, maybe his team's not getting any better this year, and he's the first overall pick in 2025 or whatever. But at the same time, I think this was a little get your guysy, but it could work out for you. I don't think it's an outrageous trade.
Again, it's not the type of deal where I'm like, you got absolutely hosed, because there is upside here for you to pay off. Like if Howell earns this starting role long term and that first ends up being the 101, like you're in a good spot. It's just for me, like the way I value Lamar, I view him as a near untouchable asset. I view the untouchables, like we kind of mentioned at the top of the show, the top 2, and then Jalen Hurts a little bit for me there right after them. After that, like the clear-cut tier 2 guys are Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, and like we we're kind of mentioning, CJ Stroud's probably working into that equation.
Yeah, for sure. So not a bad trade there, but we gave our thoughts on that. Avarice in here, 12 teams, super flex, full PPR, no tight end premium. He sells a 2024 and a 2024, two 2024 picks, a first and a second. He said the first is projected to be late, the second is projected to be mid for Michael Mayer and Zach Charbonnet. What say you?
Yeah, okay. Now that you have the context that it's going to be late and going to be mid to late, it's a little bit closer. But you mentioned that he's trying to rid points.
Yeah, I think he's tanking right now.
Yeah, so if you're tanking, then you're getting production off your roster, you're liquidating, and you don't need the players to be able to produce for you right now. So you may as well just put that back into an asset that can't lose value.
Yeah, see, the tough thing for me is that I think both of these guys are good long-term investments. So it's like
they are, but
Mayer, while he's probably like at face value, I think Michael Mayer is worth slightly less than a 2024 late first.
Well, let's think about it right now. Let's try to map out the late first of that. Let's try to map out the late first range of the 2024 class. Like you might be looking at quarterback 4 at that point, whether it's Penix, whether it's McCarthy, whether it's someone like that.
Yeah,
you might be looking at wide receiver 4,
RB2.
Keon Coleman types, Adonai Mitchell, maybe if he goes in the first round.
Emeka Egbuka,
right?
Potentially Raheem Sanders or Trey Benson or somebody like that.
I think this may legitimately be one of the best draft classes like we've seen from a fantasy standpoint. If the running back class just lived up to the expectations, I would say that with a full chest.
And there's a chance that they turn it around at the end of the season. They're starting to perform a little bit better. And I don't disagree with you. I think it's possible that this is the best class since 2020, at least in terms of prospects, like where you are getting Pittman and T. Higgins in the mid-second round. And that shouldn't have happened.
Ridiculous.
Like Pittman and T. Higgins as prospects would have been, more so late first round caliber assets. But because the class was so deep, so strong, such a good wide receiver class in 2020, such a great running back class in 2020, great quarterback class in 2020 with Burrow, Herbert, and Tua and Jalen Hurts. Like that class was unbelievable. And I think it's possible, maybe not the quarterback side of it, because those guys have all been unbelievable, but the rest of the class should be pretty strong, especially at wide receiver and Bowers and all these guys. So yeah, I think given the investment into the class that you're investing in, I think it's a good trade. Although I will say I actually really like Michael Mayer and Zach Charbonnet long term.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Next trade that we got listed here is from is this from D Parita's perspective? Or
yeah, we got it from Diego here.
Smashed.
So he said, I believe he said he's a tanking team. So he said he now has 3 2024 firsts and 4 in 2025 as well. So basically, the way I look at this trade is Ayuk is worth the 2 first-round picks, and I'm really high on Ayuk. Like, even if those were late picks, I think I would still take the picks over Ayuk.
I'm taking 2 1s over Ayuk for sure.
I would as well, and I'm like really high on Ayuk. I think some people might be willing to take only 1 first for Ayuk, and I'm not one of those people. Like, I would.
Well, I mean, for stars, I mean, you could look at me. I traded. Again, my valuation on Ayuk has gone up since then because I did this deal in week 2, but I traded him for a mid-projected 1, a mid-projected 2, and a mid-projected 3. Now, I mean, if you want to say make the 3 an early projected 2, that's probably about where we're at, right?
I would say Ayuk is worth a mid to late first and an early 2. That's probably about as
easily,
value.
yeah. Well, that's what I mean. I got a mid 1, a mid 2, and a mid 3, and then at the time, like you say you didn't like the deal, but I'm saying like his value's probably gone up a little bit to the point where that 3 maybe is maybe a late 2 now. So a 1, a mid projected 2, and a late 2 rather than the 3. So a 1 and 2.
And I mean, at face value in this deal, Mingo's worth what, a late second right now. Charbonnet's worth a mid second. You got two 1s, a mid second, and a late second for Ayuk, and Cooks isn't even worth a late second at this point in time. No. So I mean, you're
Smash.
just value hounding essentially here with this trade. So I definitely love that trade for you, and especially that you're tanking. You get the production of Brandon Ayuk off of your team, who is producing at a pretty high level. So great trade for you there. He also asked us when our next dynasty decisions is. So maybe we'll have to get on the hopper and do one of those, or maybe a couple of those before the trade deadlines come up, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to be interested in that. Last dynasty trade, and then we'll rapid fire the waiver stuff here. TK going after a Breece Hall share. He didn't give me any context about what his team is like. I'm assuming he's competitive just based on.
Well, if you're trading for Breece Hall, you're competitive straight up. You're not buying running back points if you're not.
It is not his 1, though. I blurred out the name. It is not his first. So I don't know where that first is. I'm going to assume he didn't trade an early first for Breece Hall. So let's say it's a mid to late first. DeAndre Swift and Elijah Moore for Breece.
Yeah. No, I'm still taking, like, if you're competing, I'm still taking Breece for sure.
Really? That's a little surprising coming from you, because, I mean, DeAndre Swift and Breece Hall are not all that different from a production standpoint.
I'm assuming it's a late 1, and I think they are pretty different from a production standpoint.
From a dynasty value standpoint, I think they're vastly different as well.
Yes. And when it comes to Breece Hall, real quick, he's a legitimate 20-plus PPR point per game scorer moving forward. In my opinion, he's got that level of upside, and he's still in his second year, and we're expecting this offense to get better moving forward. So if you're competing, again, like we kind of said, we're pigeonholing. If this is a mid or earlier projected pick, give me the pick side. If this is a late pick, like we said, 110, 112 area, and I can use DeAndre Swift and Elijah Moore, who, I mean, we got to call a spade at this point. Like, Elijah Moore just has not been living up to the expectations myself and you had for him. So at this point, if you're moving non-needle movers to go up and get a needle mover in a production window, in a contending window, I don't mind making this move. And I do like this move a lot for him.
Yeah, for sure. So
start 9 as well. Start 9.
What's up?
Start 9 as well.
Yeah, shallow league format. Claire's in the chat. She said, basically, don't forget roasting my Puka trade. I didn't pick your trade because Puka we've talked about on numerous occasions from a dynasty perspective. But basically, she traded away Puka Nacua for a first, a second, and Chris Godwin. I'm not exactly sure where that first and second end up being, but I think that's relatively, I would honestly probably, it's probably about even. If that's both mid to late picks, I think that's probably a fair trade.
Yeah, I would about say so. It just never feels good giving up Puka Nacua. I'm not gonna lie. So we are caught up there. Are we reading the supers now? Right?
Yeah, let's rip through some of the waiver guys. So I'm just gonna go through like my top 5. Danny actually and I this is a bad waiver week. Let's just call a spade a spade. This is not a very good waiver week. There's like 1 or 2 pretty solid pickups, and then the rest of the waivers just fucking sucks ass. So I don't know how I'm gonna come up with 10 players to talk about. Most of them are gonna be like stashes and tight ends and stuff like that in tomorrow's video, but. My number 5 waiver ad of the week is the Saints backups, Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller. I think Jamal Williams is definitely the preferred pickup there. Basically, we talked about it already, but Alvin Kamara, since week 6, went from like 78% of the snaps to like 71%, then down to like 57%, then 50% this past week. So his role is declining. And even though I think Kamara is like a good low-end RB1, high-end RB2 rest of the season, he's still 28 years old. He's still well over the age and touch apex for running backs. And the whole like situation is making me want to sell high on Kamara and then also stash Jamal Williams / Kendre Miller, mainly Jamal Williams, because I think if Kamara were to miss a couple games here and there, Jamal Williams would probably be, a mid to low end RB2 in my weekly rankings that week. So that's basically how I view Jamal Williams. Not a super high upside, not a super sexy pick, but if you have a bench spot burning a hole in your pocket and you can drop, Elijah Mitchell or somebody like that, then I'm fine doing it for Jamal Williams.
Yeah, and I mean, if I'm looking at it right now, real quick, another guy that I really like off the waivers this week is gonna be Keaton Mitchell. Very efficient.
Don't skip ahead, Danny. Don't skip ahead.
I didn't have an order of 5. I'm just
okay. Well, he's high for me, so let's
okay.
go
I'll just add on to you then. Keep going.
Sure.
Then.
Okay, so number 4 for me is Zay Jones. And again, really under the radar guy. I actually picked him up straight up in my home league right now because he was on bye this past week. I was able to just straight up add him. I didn't actually have to put in a waiver claim. But he mainly for deep leagues, I think Zay Jones is a good option because if you play in a league with like 2 wide receivers and 3 flexes and it's full PPR or whatever, Zay Jones is the type of guy that I think you could throw into your flex if you needed a bye week filler. And the Jags were on bye this past week. Zay Jones could finally get healthy. He's basically only played 1 game this season. And in that game, he went 7 targets, 5 receptions, 55 yards, and a nice touchdown in week 1. And I think that was the only game also where we've seen the Jags offense look like how I expected them to look this year, was that first game when Calvin Ridley was firing, when Zay Jones was firing. We didn't see Christian Kirk do anything in that game. But I think Zay Jones might be a bigger part of this offense than people think. And he could actually be a flex contributor. Similar to like what you thought of like Josh Palmer before he went out is kind of how I feel about Zay Jones now.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Zay Jones, like you kind of said, he has that role kind of locked down for that team. When he is healthy, the only problem is he just simply hasn't been healthy thus far. You saw, like you kind of said, he had that big time performance. I'm assuming he's not on your list. So I'm just going to say, do you have Taysom Hill on your list or should I?
I do not, because he's rostered in far more than 50% or 40% of leagues.
All right, so I'm on. I was on PFF. He was listed at 39.1. So
yeah, that was sure. He's on Sleeper. He's rostered in 61%.
Okay, fair. Okay, all right, you can go on.
Demario Douglas, number 3 for me on this list here. He led all Patriots wide receivers in targets, in routes, in snaps, 55 yards this past week on 7 targets. Is it a great offense? Absolutely not. Do I want to watch the New England Patriots? No. But again, deeper leagues with a lot of wide receiver spots, a lot of flex spots. He's the number 1 here by default, and he's essentially the new Kendrick Bourne, although I don't think he's as good of a player. And his offensive snaps have climbed every week, and he is a rookie, so we sometimes expect these guys to get better as the season goes along. But again, pretty aggressively medium. None of these guys that I've talked about so far, I'm willing to even spend more than like 0 to 5% of my remaining budget on. Like, just if you can get them for basically nothing, then get them for nothing. Otherwise, just let your league mates pick them up. First quickly waiver guys that I'll let you comment on in a second here are the guys that I'm actually willing to spend fab on. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say another name like that kind of fits this type of role where, I mean, if you want to do like a free type of claim or a buck or two, Jalen Tolbert had his best game as a pro. Michael Gallup has looked consistently worse and worse on a given game-to-game basis. And if this starts becoming a thing where that wide receiver 3 role, even wide receiver 2, because Brandon Cooks has kind of been involved recently, becomes open, like he commanded 5 targets on 41% of the snaps this past week. Again, it might be a flash in the pan. He hasn't really shown anything throughout his career, but if you're in a deep league and you can stash him and see what's coming forward, like his schedule coming up, they are going to need to throw the football moving forward. And with the way Dak's been going, man, like we know CeeDee Lamb's going to be involved. We know Jake Ferguson's going to be involved, but if he's going to be throwing the ball 35, 40 plus times per game, there's plenty of work for Jalen Tolbert to see. So again, not a high priority pickup. This is more so like a deeper league guy. If you have like 6 or 7 bench spots and you have, 3 wide receivers, 2 flexes, or 2 wide receivers, 3 flexes, and you need a guy in a pinch come bye weeks, I think you could potentially see a bigger role moving forward.
Yeah, Cedric Tillman's the guy that's going to be in tomorrow's video. That fits the same description because he played like 75% of the Brown snaps in his first game without Donovan Peoples-Jones there. We already talked about how Elijah Moore hasn't really been performing. So Tillman could step up if need be there. But the top 2 guys, number 2, these guys would be number 1 respectively, depending on your team situation. So if you needed production, then Keaton Mitchell would be my number 1. If you need upside and a stash, Zach Charbonnet would be my number 1. So Zach Charbonnet, 39% rostered right now across Sleeper, ESPN, and Yahoo leagues combined. So he barely fits the description for this video. He has outsnapped Kenneth Walker in 2 straight games, as we talked about already. Again, he's outplayed Kenneth Walker for the most part on a per carry basis. Is Charbonnet actually better than Kenneth Walker? I'm not exactly sure. I think he was a great prospect, and him and Walker had similar grades for me coming out, to be honest. But I do think, as I've mentioned on numerous occasions, we nuke every running back in the NFL who's a starter. Zach Charbonnet is the RB1 in fantasy. That's the way I look at it. He's the best handcuff in fantasy. He would be the RB1, the lead back for an offense that likes to run the ball. And I think he's a talented enough player that he would be really, really good down the stretch, even if they have like a tough schedule like I talked about already. So Charbonnet for me, 30 to 50% of your remaining fab. If you only have like 20 fab bucks left and you want to drop 10, 15 bucks on Zach Charbonnet, hold him at the end of your bench. If you're 7-1 or whatever your record is, 7-2, 8-1 or something like that, and you just need some upside for the end of your bench, I think Charbonnet is the perfect guy to stash right now.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. Charbonnet has looked good, looked efficient on his touches. Like we kind of mentioned at the top of the show with Kenneth Walker, are we worried about him? Well, if Zach Charbonnet is going to keep out snapping him, there's still a role to be had on this team. So definitely love that. Obviously, the implied upside too. If Kenneth Walker were to miss any time, you're looking at a legitimate 20 opportunity per game workhorse. So I love Zach Charbonnet. I think you pretty much covered it.
Yep. Number one or number two, depending on your team situation, is Keaton Mitchell. For me, I have 30 to 50% of your remaining fab I'm willing to spend on him. This backfield is crowded, and I get that. Justice Hill played 63% of the snaps this past week. Gus Edwards has 6 touchdowns in the last 3 games, which is pretty crazy, but he played only 18% of the snaps. I think if the Ravens had a guy that was emerging, and I mean, it's a perfect example knowing that J.K. Dobbins would have been a league winner, which still pisses me off that he tore his Achilles. But reports were that Keaton Mitchell was really impressing the coaching staff all the way back in training camp. He goes on IR, and as a UDFA, they hold him the entire season. Like, that's not usually something a team is willing to do, and it means that they were probably pretty high on him to begin with. And when we look at like the snap share this past week, once garbage time took over, Justice Hill played 17 of 19 snaps. So that 63% of the snaps that he played this past week is a little bit, murky in terms of why he actually played that much. Keaton Mitchell, the bottom line is he rushed 9 times for 138 yards, and he broke off 2 long ones. And if Mitchell is legit, I think he can beat out essentially J.K. Dobbins' backups coming into this year. Like, these guys were not expected to be elite running backs. And on any given week, Gus Edwards and Justice Hill go back and forth as it is. So if somebody like Keaton Mitchell emerges in this backfield, it's possible that those guys just remain backups.
Yeah, no, 100%. Again, I still think Gus is going to be involved to a certain degree because he is, the bigger running back. He's been efficient throughout his career. But I mean, if Keaton Mitchell keeps playing the way he has been, like, Justice Hill, sorry, buddy, you're taking a seat. Like, you are not touching the field. Keaton Mitchell and Gus Edwards, honest to God, if they keep playing the way they have been, or I mean, Keaton Mitchell 1 game, but Gus Edwards in the 3 games prior, that might be one of the better running back duos in the entire league. And obviously having Lamar Jackson as a threat in the backfield as well. Like, how do you scheme up for that if you're defense?
Yeah, never thought we'd be saying that coming into the season.
Crazy.
Again, I'm still sad that J.K. Dobbins is hurt because I think he would have been a league winner this year. But
drafted him in my home league, one of them.
Yeah, you hate to see it. Anyways, that is the end of the stream. Let's go through some comments. We got a couple supers. My buddy Dylan won big on the Houston Buccaneers game. So if you guys follow me on Twitter, you saw that I won a pretty sizable amount of change yesterday on the games. I had the under on the Packers Rams game. I had the what was the other bets that I had there? I had the Bears covering the spread, which was definitely a sweat because the Saints ended up kneeling out and leaving it that the Bears ended up covering the spread there, even though they could have scored and ruined the spread for me. And then the Commanders also almost lost theirs because Mac Jones got picked off on the last drive. He could have tied the game. They could have went to overtime, whatever. The spread was 2.5. They won by 3, which is huge. But the Houston game was the sweat of the year, as Dylan puts it here, because the Houston game was the final missing piece of that parlay. And of course, Tampa Bay scores at the end of the game. It looks like they were going to win the game. And then I was like, hold on just a minute. I'm a Buccaneers fan. I don't want to see my team lose, but at the same time, we're not going to do anything this year. I would rather have a high draft pick. I know that's not something you're supposed to say about your own football team, but Baker Mayfield is not winning us a Super Bowl. It's never going to happen. So I would rather have a high draft pick. And I saw CJ Stroud obviously go down the field and cover the Houston Texans money line, which was the final piece of that parlay for me and for Dylan, who actually also had the Raiders covering the spread in his. So he won like $1,800. I won 750 yesterday. So that one was really good. I also hit on AJ Brown, Josh Jacobs, and who was the other guy that scored? Jonathan Taylor. That was a anytime touchdown 3-leg parlay that I think is that the one that I built on the stream?
Wait, what was it? Jonathan Taylor? No, the one on stream was with Tony Pollard, I thought.
Oh yeah, right. Sorry, yeah, that one missed because Tony Pollard didn't score.
Right. Is that the only leg that missed for you? Was it Tony Pollard?
I think maybe one of the other ones got. I actually think both of the legs that missed in that parlay were both because the touchdown got called back.
Show me that leg right now.
The other person was in that parlay.
You gotta show me that because that is fucking tragic. If so,
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I won a decent amount of money yesterday,
Yeah,
so
but
I'm not
still.
really too mad about it. I told you before we started going live, I also had a 5-leg parlay on the Sunday night game. 3 legs hit. The 2 that missed were Tyler Boyd scoring and T. Higgins scoring, both of whom were like an inch away from scoring. Higgins
Yeah.
gets knocked out at the 1-yard line. Boyd ended up dropping a pass that would have been a touchdown. But yeah, let me look at that one that just missed, because I think somebody was the first leg of it, and I think it might have been Gus Edwards. Was the first leg of scoring the touchdown in that one. I'm trying to see it here. What do we got? It was Gus Edwards, Tony Pollard. Oh, it was Bijan Robinson was the other leg of that one. So yeah, he wasn't close to scoring there, but that was one of the few that missed yesterday that I was putting out there. So Cody actually also sent us a super chat. I don't know, did he say
Appreciate
a
that. I
question
will take a
throughout
look.
this chat here?
I will take a look. I don't see anything here. Let me keep rolling.
I'll let you
Uh,
find that there.
Dude, what the fuck with Arthur Smith really regretting trading ETN, fucking praying for Arthur Smith's firing. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
fucking
I'm sure we probably advised you to trade ETN for Bijan at one point during the
it
season.
was, it was Bijan and Olave for ETN, if I remember the trade correctly, which process wise, like, it's a fucking awesome move. Like, and Bijan, like, yes, we're emotional right now about him, but like, he's still fucking awesome. Like,
Yeah,
he's
no,
like,
I mean, again,
I honestly
Bijan
can't
is a
tell
buy
you.
low. Like, he just flat out is. You have
He
to send
is.
offers for him because he's probably being viewed right now as a low end RB1 at best in some leagues, probably less in most.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's I honestly just don't know what to say. I mean, I don't know how you can trot out Tyler Algier when he's been literally as dog shit as he's been this year. Because again, he had a great first game, and again, we liked him coming out of the draft. But at the same point, we got to call a spade here. How do you continue trotting out a guy who is averaging on the year 3.2 yards per carry over your 8th overall pick? Genuinely.
Yeah, and also you're trotting out a journeyman tight end in Jonnu Smith over your 4th overall pick tight end in Kyle Pitts. Like, because again, if you combine Algier and Bijan's usage, it would be an elite running back. If you combine Jonnu Smith and Kyle Pitts' usage, it would be an elite tight end. The only guy not getting screwed is Drake London when he's on the field.
Yeah. No, bro. It's fucked because when you think about it, it almost feels like Arthur Smith is like doing it just to fuck with people. I don't know what it is. Like I
The
don't.
sentiment on Twitter was like Arthur Smith is so committed to this bit, he's willing to lose games. Like that's literally, he's like, I'm so bad at the fantasy community that I am going to purposely lose.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Anyways, again, we will be live later tonight before the Monday night game. So if you guys have questions, we'll definitely get to some of those later on. I'm just kind of skimming through the chat. A lot of people talking about Taysom Hill. He's obviously been great. A couple of people talk about Trey McBride. I think Trey McBride's a top 12 tight end rest of the season. Even though, how did he perform this past week? I don't remember what he actually did.
Trey McBride?
Yeah.
I mean, the offense scored 0 points. I'm assuming not very good. Five targets, 3 receptions, 22 yards, and they got blown out 27-0.
Yeah, and I mean, Kyler's coming back this
Yeah.
week, so Trey McBride's definitely, like, who would you rather have rest of the season? Would you rather have Trey McBride or Cole Kmet?
So actually, I just touched upon my rest of season rankings, and I mean, I could just read off my top 15 tight ends. So in order, as of right now, I'm still kind of workshopping it, but let me go half PPR. Kelsey 1, Mark Andrews 2, Sam Laporta 3, Dalton Kincaid 4, Hawkinson 5, Kittle 6, Ferguson 7, Engram 8, Taysom Hill 9, Dalton Schultz 10, Cole Kmet 11, Trey McBride 12, and then 13 on, you're looking at like Pitts, Mayer, and Njoku.
God, isn't that depressing? Saying Kyle Pitts is tight end 13 right now in the rest of the season. I have him at 13 as well. I have McBride at 12 and Pitts at 13. And Cole, I never thought I'd see the day that Jake Ferguson, Cole Kmet, and Trey McBride are ahead of Kyle Pitts in my rankings.
Yeah, so to answer your question, yeah, McBride is literally the 12 on the dot, but I'm sad. I'm sad
as well. And we'll cover this in the trade targets video this week, so we'll get you the answer for that. Just looking through and skimming through the comments as well. Are we still trusting Ridley? Absolutely. I still think he's a really good buy low right now. Should I drop Fields or Goff? Fields probably won't be back this week, so if you needed a quarterback for this game, I would say you should probably roll with Goff. Couple Tony Pollard hatred things in here. I feel you guys on that one. But yeah, we are at the end of the stream here. Henry or White rest of the season. Rachaad White, we didn't really talk about. He's the best running back on the week this past week in terms of overall fantasy scoring. Probably a sell high, give or take. But I do think he's a mid RB2 rest of the season. He's going to have games like this because he's finally being used as a receiver. Right now, let me ask you this. Rest of season rankings, Rachaad White ranks where? And who is he around?
So I'm going to have to raise him up because obviously I've been pretty low on him for the most part. And the way I'm kind of landing on him is, how would you rank the range of Mixon, Pacheco, Walker, Achane, Aaron Jones, Javonte, and Rachaad White?
Rachaad White is well below those guys, as is Achane, to be honest. I'm not 100% convinced that...
Well, the reason why I mentioned that is that's the mid running back 2 range in my rankings.
Yeah, so I have White at 22, which is more of the low end RB2 realm. Because I still have Mostert ahead of him, I still have Gibbs ahead of him, I have Achane ahead of him. I mean, Saquon takes a huge hit without Daniel
That's
Jones.
what I was going to say. Saquon Barkley is my 20 right now. Would you take Rachaad? I think I would take Rachaad White over Saquon Barkley, as crazy as that sounds.
That is a really crazy statement.
The offense is going to be a fucking train wreck in New York, dude. It's going to be a train wreck.
Oh God, that's so disgusting.
Are they genuinely speaking with Danny DeVito's bastard son at quarterback? Are they scoring freaking 10 points a game? They put up 6 on the Raiders.
They gotta get a better quarterback than Tommy fucking DeVito.
They scored 6 on the Raiders defense that got obliterated by the Lions. Obliterated by them. 6 points.
Yeah, I know. They're like, how many games the rest of the season are we going to project the Raiders in Vegas, or sorry, the Giants in Vegas for more than 12 points? Like, how many times are they going to have an implied point total above 12? Like 3 more times this year, maybe?
Maybe.
It's going to be bad, dude. Saquon's, if you guys got Saquon Barkley, it is a rough scene out there.
In the smashiest of smash spots, Saquon had 14.3 points because of DeVito at quarterback. He should have scored 30 points in this game if we're keeping it in sack, if the offense was good.
Yeah.
If we're looking at a weekly ceiling of 15 points, I'm sorry, you are an RB2. You are a low end RB2.
Yeah, and I mean, if Rachaad White's going to continue getting the targets he's getting, his workload is really not all that different from Saquon's, to be honest. Like in terms of, snap share and usage and that kind of thing. Like, he has 4, 7, 6, and 4 targets the last couple weeks.
They're both inefficient backs that get a lot of receiving work, except I trust the Bucs offense moving forward. It sounds gross. I don't want to admit it because I don't like Rachaad White. I don't think he's a very good player, but that's where we're at, man. That's where we're fucking at.
Yeah, I said go buy low on Rachaad White. He's rewarded you with 16, 18, and 28 PPR points the last 3 weeks. Now it's time to sell him.
I mean, it's so funny how we had the debate of Gibbs versus White, and they've literally just both been dominant since that video.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Anyways, yeah, if you could take Rachaad White and go sell him for Bijan, you're gonna be able to do it in some leagues. I guarantee it.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
no, for sure.
Bijan, trying to think Montgomery too as well. I'd probably sell Rachaad White for him straight up. Pollard as well. Like, you might be able to get to some of these guys using Rachaad White. So that is the end of the stream. Again, if you guys did enjoy, if you've been around here the entire time as well, leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel. If you guys are new around here, leave any of your comments once the stream is over. Waiver, final waiver wire stuff after tonight's game will be live tomorrow. If Quentin Johnston's sitting on your waiver wire right now, you should probably pick him up and add him at the end of your bench. But other than him, I don't really think of anybody that's that relevant. Like, you're not going to be picking up Josh Kelly or anything like that, because we've literally seen when Eckler's been out, he was dog shit. So yeah, make sure to stash Quentin Johnston for tonight. But yeah, with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.